big difficulty here is the revised constitution and bylaws of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe was organized under the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act. Now, that was an act of Congress that purportedly was to use this vehicle to distribute monies. But it also did another thing. It put us under the thumb of the federal government. Their policy. They call the shots. So we're at a big disadvantage there because these bodies are not sovereign. It isn't like they're treaties. They are acts of Congress controlling us. A lot of folks don't know that. You know, when they talk about, oh, we're a sovereign nation. Well, you know, they're only as sovereign as Congress allows them to be. We all have to understand that. I don't know if the general public knows that. But they played a role of being a sovereign when in fact they're attached to the federal government. Look at your enrollment cards or your hunting and fishing cards. What does it say there? That they are agencies of the federal government. There goes your sovereignty out the window. And that's why they refer to them as quasi or quasi, however they use the term. But you can't be sovereign attached to another government. And so when we look at the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, and you know the problems we're experiencing right now are they are a consolidation, meaning those 6 tribes were put into one, 6 bands put into one. That's what it means, consolidation. We're one tribe. In the federal government, that's what they recognize us as, one tribe. It isn't, you know, individual tribes. It's not a confederation. We're one. And that's where people are getting confused. Well, Whiter says, oh, well, we can do what we want to do, and Leech Lake says the same thing, Mille Lacs, they're all different. Fond du Lac, I'm sure, you know, does the same thing. Like they're independent, and they're not. They're not independent. They're one. And that's why I believe a lot of people think that, oh, well, we're a confederation here made up of 6 reservations, each is independent of the other, when in fact they're not. And we have to hold them to that. Now, either the system is going to work, and it hasn't, because somewhere along the line here, things went awry. But we do have a written constitution that everybody's supposed to be going under. They're not. And I think this is the goal of the federal government to set all these systems up. As we look at this history here, we start finding, well, that's exactly what they're doing. It's a big lie. The Constitution as written is supposed to be the supreme authority, and it's not. You know, it's like they trashed it. So their powers are defined, and that's what we have to communicate to the people as a whole. They have no more power than what is listed, written down. And nowhere in there does it say they can set up courts. Nowhere does it say they can interpret the Constitution. I think that began way back in 1980. They started doing that. those tribal constitution interpretations are in fact amendments without the people's participation. But if we can get into that thought process here and communicate that to our people, something can be done. I believe a lot of our people are totally uninformed about what the Constitution is. So you have Mille Lacs over there, wrote their own Constitution. They say we're independent of this, and the tribe, and all of them have done it. Whiter, last one to do it, but they're taking the lead in everything. But discuss that. What do you think of that? What do we do? How do we counter what they're doing here? The only powers they have, the TEC is Article 5 here. That defines their powers, period. Article 6 for the RBCs, the only powers they have is what's listed there. That's what a written constitution is all about. Nothing more, nothing less. If they want to add to that, they have to come to the people, and the people must do that. They must amend it, and they haven't.
I believe the ultimate case is going to be going back and going at full shit and works all the way back to 1871 when they took that power from the president. From that point on, they started treating us. But then in 34, when they created, in 36, when they ratified the reorganization of it, then right from then on, it was legislation over us. Before, you had to meet with the people. You had to get consent from everyone. Now, all of a sudden, you can just work with 5 people. And that's why, like Mark said, they call them quasi, whatever the term, right pronunciation. But it means it's nothing. It means almost it negatives your real identity. Then they can pass legislation over because you're part of them. But the real people stand up, and I think it should be people from all 6 reses, a group of individuals from each res, and say, hey, this is enough. You know, we're a sovereign people. These guys that are running our show right now are not a sovereign. They're a part of the federal government, therefore null and void to the real sovereign. And I think that's the position we should really take, because we keep saying, oh, this act, the women against this, or that, this and that. We're going to be fighting one act at a time all the way through the damn thing. And that's been my opinion for many years. It's got to go back to where it started. You can't just go one at a time back to it. I don't know what anybody else thinks about that, but if we're the real sovereign, we have to challenge that they're legislating over us. You know, they don't legislate over Canada, Mexico, anywhere else, but they're doing it to us. On one hand, they're saying you're a sovereign. The other hand, they're saying, you know, we're controlling, we're running you. You know, you can't do this, you can't do that unless we say so. But that's my opinion, and I think we have to challenge that whole works. Otherwise, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. Our grandkids and great grandkids will be sitting here discussing the same things.
Well, I certainly think that's true, that Congress, the United States government plays a big role in our politics and our structure of government. You know, that's what it's all about. They passed an act in 34 and said, this is your government. However, the Constitution that was adopted in 36 is no longer in existence. They changed that in, 63? Ratified it, or people voted on it in 64. And that's supposed to be the rule of law. And if there's going to be any changes to that document, then the people, by amendment, and that's what they term rigid. It's a rigid constitution, meaning it has an amendment process that must be gone by in order for them to acquire or attain any authority that's not listed there. But they haven't been going by that. It's all been attempts, or what's a legal term, presumptions, that nobody has questioned, like in 1980. And I think we brought this up many times before. I think Camp Truth did, Camp Justice did. That's what we were talking about. Hey, you guys don't have the authority you're trying to say you have. In 1987, what did they do? They attempted to, because they were getting so much flack from the people, saying you can't do that because the Constitution says you can't. So what they do in 87, they tried to amend the Constitution, right? And what they were amending it to do was absolute power. They had all inherent authority. And the people rose up and said, no, we don't want that, you know. And it was all of us who were involved in that, who knew what was going on, to stop that effort. And we did. We were told by the powers that be at the time that it's like a big train. You can't stop it once it gets rolling. But the power of the people did stop it. You remember that, Pete? And we met in Leaf Lake at the palace. It wasn't the palace at the time, but that's where the people met, and they backed out. They backed down. And Pete, you and the chairman there played a big role in that. And that was taken off. It didn't go through. If it would have, they would have absolute power. So there is significance in this Constitution now, simply because that's the governing document. I don't care what Mille Lacs has done. I don't care what Whitehurst has done. All these reservations have done it wrong. And it's time for the people themselves to realize this and bring them back in line. Otherwise, if they don't go by it, why should we? We have the right to adopt it. We have a right to take it apart then. That's a constitutional right. If we're going by the constitutional form of government, then that is what has to be done.
Well, when Anderson made that interpretation that gives them deference to yeah, and they didn't give any legal analysis, any kind of thought on that at all. You see nothing in there. Just I give them deference. You know.
Well, deference is not law. It's a scam, is what was told there. Now, I don't know. Is Michael J. Anderson, who's is he the parent, or is it Mark Anderson for the tribe?
Mark is a lawyer on record for the Minnesota Chippewa tribe.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
McGlitch. Yeah, with the help of all the people, yes, we will.
I think it's the help of the spirit. So.
All right. You got me on that one.
You know
I got your bag over here, Carol.
Several years ago, I don't know how many, but probably more than several. But I made a statement that Whitehurst, or excuse me, Mille Lacs, their new constitution was unconstitutional according to the Constitution that we go by, and because they want to change it. They want to change all the time. But the Constitution that we have, that was from 1934 is a document that is probably not perfect, but the people that changed the Constitution at Mille Lacs got kind of angry at me for saying what I said, that the Constitution was unconstitutional according to our Constitution. And Margie Anderson, who was the chairman at the time, got mad at me for that. You know, and I don't have any problem with Margie or anything like that, but we have a disagreement on philosophy, I guess. But that Constitution that they made up is not been approved by anybody. The same as the one that I seen written up by White Earth. When I first been getting used to what I was reading, I had a problem with that because I'm from Fond du Lac, but my wife was from White Earth. And what happens, you know, I have kids that are enrolled at the Minnesota Chippewa. What happens to their blood? You know, that none of them questions have been answered. They haven't probably haven't been asked.
Interpret that for me. What do you mean, or what are you talking about here?
I'm talking about if you have a change in the Constitution at White Earth, you take the blood of Fond du Lac and blood of my wife and our kids. They have dual blood, but it's only considered one because Minnesota Chippewa tribe is how we get enrolled. It's not Fond du Lac or White Earth or anything. It's Minnesota Chippewa tribe enrolling. But what happens to all of a sudden they pull the rug out from underneath it, and there's no explanation of the blood that my kids have from White Earth. There's questions like that bothers me. And I've been reading about something about this. Their election ordinance, for instance, is the people on White Earth are going to have to be, if this current paperwork gets approved, or if they approve it, the people have to be 21 years old to vote, even, and now it's 18. How come you're losing 3 years of eligibility all of a sudden? And but I just don't see any advantage anywhere with this change in government constitutions. And I don't think you can't just change, you just can't change constitutions. What right has White Earth or Mille Lacs got to change stuff? And I understand Leech Lake is trying to change their constitution. I don't understand what's happening. And I agree with Marvin that we got to do something to have our way. We can't let these RBCs do this to us.
Is that who, excuse me, is that who you, when you say they, is that who you're talking about, that handful of people? Is there one who's gonna change this constitution
Yeah.
for enrollment?
Yeah.
Or is it us? I thought they would take a vote amongst the Debwewin people here, hey, you sign this if you want this change. Or is it just them people?
I don't think they're talking about having a secretarial election. The secretarial election is how how it's all changed in mass. But I don't think white or blacks change theirs like any. I don't see how they change it. I try to remember. I went down to see Art Garbo when I first got in office, and I don't think their residents approve that. I think it was the council.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about that would be our council over here who's gonna change that then later.
Yeah, I think that's what they have in mind, but I don't know that. But I think that's how Mille Lacs did it.
Well then, like say, if we started a petition around here amongst the wider community here, if we don't want this and we brought it over, what would they do with that? Wipe their ass with it?
I hope not, but that's
Well, I think,
all,
I think the confusion is when they started these self-governance compacts, right? There had to be action taken by the TEC at that time, and it was 1990. The TEC had to authorize Mille Lacs to go into this compact with the federal government, right?
Yeah.
They had to authorize that.
In that's that process that you just talked about is how their Solicitor General says that
They're not a part of.
their constitution got approved.
Right.
Because
But-
the federal government made this contract with Mille Lacs on self-governance.
Okay.
I
Right.
how
And
can
that's
that fit, Mark?
like an amendment to the Constitution without the people participating in that.
That's how I see it.
Right. And that's the way it is. I don't care what they say.
I think you're
And
right.
I will.
That's how I read that, and that can't be right.
Oh, listen, this was, they were really attempting to overturn the opinions of the Department of Interior's Office of the Solicitor. That's the attorneys for the Department of Interior. And they really got after him about change those opinions. Those opinions are handicapping us because we can't carry out the dictates of those compacts. And a letter written by they give themselves good titles here. Solicitor General of Mille Lacs.
I think that's the guy that
Right.
says that this is because the government made these self-governance contracts that
Right.
their new constitution is in place. and
They're
that-
different. They're separate.
Yeah,
That's
that's what it
baloney.
said. Yeah, I thought it was too.
Right. This guy is talking about, he said, the field solicitors' past opinions prohibit tribal courts for Minnesota Chippewa bands because the tribal constitution does not specifically mention them. If it's not mentioned and if it's not a part of their power, they don't have it. And that's what they're missing here. But he says, however, one, that argument flies in the face of accepted 10th Amendment. Well, what the heck's he talking about? 10th Amendment. They're talking about the United States Constitution. It has nothing to do with our Constitution. Rules of constitutional interpretation that powers not specifically granted to the central government are, and he's got underlined, retained by the members. So that's a retained power of ours, and they have no business going outside of that, right? That's the way it is. That's the constitutional form of government. Goes on to say, and these are lies, these are blatant lies. There's no, this is a legal fiction here too. Article 1, Section 3 of the revised Constitution and bylaws of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe states that the purpose and function of the tribal government is, in part, quote, to preserve and exercise all powers granted and provided the Indians. Emphasis added. Those powers presumably include the power to have courts. Now, what he's using there is Article 1, which is not the powers clause. It's Article 1. That's a general statement. And people don't realize that. That's flowery language trying to justify what they're doing. And that's why it's so important that the people understand what has been done to our Constitution without our input, without our authorizing them to do this. There is no powers in the preamble in Article 1. That's not a powers clause.
That's not well, RBCs, they've never been a representative government. Those are the reasons there was no separation of powers, because they've never been a representative government. They've been a business committee. And all of a sudden, when they took that name change, TEC, that was an illegal name too. I mean, the RTCs, that was an unconstitutional name change too. It was a power grab there. Now all of a sudden they're representative governments, and they're not. They're still business committees.
You can't change that. That's how.
Right.
That's what it says in the Constitution.
Right.
Yeah.
It means what it says, as written, as it exists right now. Now.
That's how I see it too, Mark.
Right? And that's reality. That's not something we dreamed up here. And he goes on to say that in October 22nd, 23rd, 80, that the Tribal Executive Committee voted 11-0 in favor of a constitutional interpretation that allowed the power to create a court system. Well, if you look at that, then that's an amendment to the Constitution, right?
If that's how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can't do it that way. There's a process they must go through.
But that vote should have been in reality a request for
A secretarial election. Right, exactly.
Because the TEC doesn't have any right to change any constitution.
Right. And that's what's so important here for people to understand. The TEC doesn't have that power to interpret the Constitution. But that's what they're basing all this garbage on, that they do have that authority. And that's what's so important, that what Ray was referring to, for them to be saying they have the power. It's not listed in the powers clauses. That's Article 5. There's nothing in there that says, well, the TEC can interpret the Constitution. It doesn't say that. That power is retained by the membership, all of us, not these 12 individuals who sit on that body. They do not have that power because that's retained by us. We have to give them the permission to do that. and that's through amendment. We have not done that. He goes on to say here, anyway, the tribal constitution is essentially obsolete in that it established a system of reservation business committees. That no longer applies to the Mille Lacs Band because we are now governed by a three-branch legislative, executive, and judicial system under our compact of self-governance between the Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa Indians and the United States of America, July 3rd, 1990, and that the compact, which was signed by the Department of Interior at the Washington level, repeatedly mentions tribal courts, agrees to submit disputes to the tribal court, and lists tribal courts as a line item number 2165 on its accompanying fiscal year agreement. That's flowery stuff and makes it sound like, hey, they really do have this authority because now they entered into this compact and somehow that compact amended our Constitution, allowing them to do it. It did not, folks. It did not do that.
I certainly agree with you, Mark. That can't be like that.
No, because you have an amendment process. They know how to amend the Constitution. What they did in '72, that was kind of a trick language there to make two amendments out of one. Huh?
They also had a chance to do the convention the right way, and they chose not to do that.
Oh yeah, you were there in 1987, Pete, when it was promised that within 18 months from that date they would hold the Constitution.
I remember that. Yeah. I come along in 1986.
About 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But see, it isn't like they can't. They know what the process is, but they're jealous of their power. They don't want the people to participate in that process because it limits their authority, and they don't want to come off or whatever as being limited in what they can do. And that's what the Constitution is all about. It limits their authority. And we didn't write that, but they got caught up into it now that it's, what would I say, Ray? It's more to their advantage if they, in fact, say they have that power to do what they're doing, huh?
Well, they're acting as two when it's one. That's what's happening. These guys are being steered along. They think they're doing all this stuff on their own. It's down here anyway, that's the ones I'm talking about. But they're being steered down this path.
Well, yeah.
They're acting as
exactly.
if there's two sovereigns there. And it's bullshit. There's one sovereign, that's the federal government, and they're a part of them, and they're directing their own people to disassemble us and acting like it's us doing it.
No,
That's
it isn't. It's them doing it. They're the agency of the federal government. It's not the people. And maybe I'm coming along kind of too strong here, but this letter, you were just reading it, Kevin. It's saying what we know is crap. It really is. Oh, they say, the solicitor office says we can't do that. And they held that for 14 years, from 1980 to 1994. They held that. Legal analysis. That's, showing why they couldn't do it legally. But in 1994, they changed that and said, we give deference. In other words, what they did was okay an amendment to the Constitution through the Tribal Executive Committee to say only they could interpret it. And their interpretation was, we can interpret this document. They gave themselves that authority. They did not have that authority. They do not have that authority today. Now that's what's going on in tribal government, and people, most people, I would say, what, 98, 99% of the people have never read that document and know what it means. That's the problem. They're hoodwinking us, they're tricking us.
I think there's members of the TC that haven't read it.
There is.
Well, yes.
We run into
I
it,
agree.
Remember that?
Yeah, that was noticeable at one meeting where we said, Constitution brought up must read. That was from
Fort,
Boys Fort.
yeah. What was his name?
I don't recall, but I remember, they had little notes, they have all the paper. Well, you know that, you sat on there. They had note on, geez, Constitution brought up, I must read. Well, yes, you must read. If you're going to properly represent the people,
They
then
should have
read
read
it.
it. They should have read it
Yeah,
the first month they were there.
right.
Before they ran, they should know what the hell they're running for.
Yes, that's really the truth.
And they're talking about this court. They were trying to set up Indian child welfare courts. I think it was Whiter, tried it, and then Fond du Lac tried it. And the solicitor's office said, no, you can't do that because you must amend your constitution first before you do it. And that's simple enough. But they said, well, we could submit a petition to assume jurisdiction under the ICWA Act and go to court when it's denied. Well, they know it's going to be denied because they need that constitutional amendment. Or have the Interior Department change its opinion. And that's what they did.
Quasi-sovereign.
Yeah.
I've been to I've been to a few of those meetings, sit back and watch. And the problem I see is when I bring up a subject up there, the president, tribal person, whatever, everybody sits back and they don't give their opinions. Did you ever notice that? Very people they'll just sit back. And they don't speak their mind. I mean, this has to come forward. I mean, if anything's going to be accomplished, these people got to give up and give their opinion, not leave that office. Well, I was for this and I was for that. I've seen that too many times, and it's just terrible.
Well,
it destroys us.
You know who runs the show, don't you?
Yeah.
It's the lawyers that run the show. And yes, some of those individuals on the TEC don't know what it's all about. It happens right here at the RBC level.
Yeah.
They don't know what it's about. You had one individual on the RBC currently said, oh, well, geez, when the lawyers write something up, I don't even read it, I just sign it. Well, what is that? And that's our problem here with the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, is you have the lawyers running the show. Why? Because we have substantive evidence right here that says that. Everything we're talking about here, we can prove. And that's what's so important for the people themselves to start grasping. We're in a heck of a mess here because we've allowed these people to go too far. And it's not the end, certainly, but the people got to get involved in this. They have to make this government work. Now, if it is something that has been imposed on our people, and we have no say in it, what good is the Constitution? We don't need it. Throw it out.
What good is the Constitution if they can legislate over you? Anytime they want to change it.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things, and I think as we go on and document these things and put it into a form of say a documentary, that's a whole nother issue here. But yeah, you're right. by them legislating over us, has disabled our ability for self-governance. And I think it's, and that's what we're trying to communicate to the people here, is there's things going on that you're unaware of that are impacting us and dismantling our sovereignty, taking it apart, and they're using an agency of the federal government to do that. One of our biggest difficulties here is the fact that they have all the resources. The federal government is feeding them money to set up their courts, to set up, law enforcement, to do all the things. Even the Bremer Foundation has funded them to change that constitution, or adopt the one that Irma wrote. And I say Irma because she was the impetus or the force behind that. And you got guys like Gerald Visner, who hasn't lived here for years, is out there in the mainstream making it, and a person by the name of Jill Dorfler, who is in fact not a member of the band here, and yet she is the main, what would you call her? Well, yeah, the main catalyst to adopt this new constitution. What I don't like here is the people are losing rights they're not even aware of, and they're being hoodwinked. That is, cheated and denied, and all the negative things to their rightful right to have a say in what goes on in government. I'd like to look at ourselves as ascendants to those treaty signers that entered into all these treaties. Fond du Lac, Grand Portage, Mille Lacs, White Earth, all these. That's who I consider myself as, an ascendant to those signatories who entered into those treaties. And the treaties were by consent, not legislation. And that's where we're getting hung up here. And that's why your question is so relevant, Raymond, because that's what we're now under. Just showing Kevin here back in 1991, and then you start putting all these pieces together.
One of the things is it's been talked about for years about this stuff. The talk is the same, and nobody's given up on it. But more people have to be educated. That's the key to it. It's the principle of education. How many people can you educate to understand what's truly going on? In our Constitution right now, there is no avenue that exists for an individual band to write its own Constitution.
Right. Well, there's nothing wrong with our current Constitution other than the tribal officials not going by it. That's the problem. And all the input from their legal councils. They have devastated us, or we have allowed them to devastate us. They don't have that authority. The people have the authority, and I want to emphasize that that's where the change is going to come from, is the people themselves. And it's time for people to get off their duffs and do something about this. It's not what can I get from a person I elected here who knows nothing about our history, our culture, and our, dilemma in dealing with the United States government. We're being totally wiped out by that so-called relationship, and they always refer to it as a government-to-government relationship, and that's what evolved out of those compacts. We now have a government-to-government relationship. Well, if you look at that, in a way that is true. The federal government to the government, that's what they're going by. a government-to-government relationship. Their government, not ours.
Well, I think we're all kind of on the same page with the problem, but I think we should find out what the hell we're going to do about it now. And start talking about where we're going from here,
I agree with you.
And
Well,
I think we're all on the same
I think, a discussion, well, go ahead.
Oh, mig which, Bedanaquat and Disneycast, Mung and Dame, the Sinanakwan, when Nolan Akin and doing Jabba, Dale Green Jr. I think we're at a point where we should talk about there is a legal distinction between those who were born Anishinaabe and those that are federally recognized through the Indian Reorganization Act. If the southwestern Anishinaabe Ojibwe people practice a traditional form of self-governance, for countless generations, that needs to be understood. Our traditional forms of self-governance were governed by the due-dame, the roles and responsibilities that each and every child and young person grew into in that role of what their clan, what their family, what their community expected of them. And that worked for countless generations. And as the French and Dutch people first came in here, part of our history that's not remembered is a lot of those children of those unions between the Dutch and the French that were adopted into the clan system. Many of those French people were adopted into the Martin clan because that was our warrior society, and of course our warrior societies always needed replenishing. We've always been an inclusive people when it came to allowing new blood and new things to come into our families and our communities, and when we find that legal distinction of who we actually are, there's a big difference between a federally recognized Indian and those of us that were born Anishinaabe from Anishinaabe parents, even if that for some of us may have been only one Anishinaabe parent. In 1871, the final solution on Indian people were started, which the Indian Civilization Act, which was to remove Indian children from the influence of their parents, grandparents, and ties to the lands and resources that the United States government had made treaty agreements with their people with. Treaties, they kind of predate the state of Minnesota. To even back up a little further, the Anishinaabe, since the time the Old World people arrived here, were making international treaties with them, whether it was the Dutch, French, English, Spaniards, or whatever. The autochthonous people of Turtle Island always made those some sort of agreement with them that were recognized through the international process. The United States, when it was the 13 colonies, they started their revolution not to become the United States or this nation that we're in right now, but we're fighting that unfair taxes without representation over in England. And eventually that dispute turned into a revolution and created the 13 colonies as a fledgling nation. And to get that international recognition as a nation, they went back to the same trick the other old world countries did, which was to negotiate treaties with the people that were around them. Not out of friendship, not out of goodwill, as you would think of it now, but out of a necessity, because they were small, weak, and couldn't take on the people that were on the East Coast. Those autochthonous people that, coming from the Chumukaman perspective, spoke that Algonquin language, which is just another name for the Anishinaabe Moin. There's a distinction that happens there because once the United States was able to become 13 colonies in a united state, they went about writing their constitution. And writing their constitution in 1776 is, I think it took a few years before they got it ratified. But
1787, they wrote it. In 1789, they ratified it.
And in that Article 1, Section 2, on who could select representatives to those House of Representatives and whatnot, they had those cool wordings in there that said excluding tax-exempt Indians. And excluding tax-exempt Indians were the people they had just previously made treaties with to get their own international recognition as a fledgling country. So it was right that they wrote that in there, that they wrote Indians couldn't select their numbers to select for House of Representatives and whatnot. And to take that even a step further, after the Civil War, which purposely made the blacks the citizens of the state they were born in, those same writers of that 14th Amendment also understood that the United States was making treaties with indigenous peoples or autochthonous people of this continent. Many treaties were made with the Anishinaabe Ojibwe people. And the same wording exists in the 14th Amendment, excluding tax-exempt Indians. Now along comes 1976 and the 100th Congress, and they put out a publication calling the Iroquois' Contribution to the U.S. Constitution, and they explain who these excluding tax-exempt Indians are. And it's just like I said, it was the people they made treaties with, because we're not really, in my opinion, citizens of the state of Minnesota, nor the citizens of the United States, because if we were, there would have been no need for the 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act. There would have been no need for the Indian Child Welfare Act, nor the 1968 American Civil Rights Act, Indian Civil Rights Act, because as citizens we would have already had that through the 14th Amendment of the 1924 American Citizenship Act. Now, having talked a little bit about that, when we look at the U.S. Constitution and treaties being the supreme law of the land, I think it's Article 4 or 5 that wording's in there. There's a real clear legal distinction of those of us who are Anishinaabe and those of us that are now federally recognized. As we go down through the years here, 1871 Act that Marv got's copy here, the American Indian Civilization Act that Adolf Hitler, incidentally modeled his Lieberstrom after the Manifest Destiny practice of the United States government, to concentrate the small groups of people onto reserved tracts of land and then bring about the final solution. And our final solution was the boarding schools and removing kids, for a number of generations there, and the influence from their parents and their grandparents, and that influence also included our spirituality and the remembrance to those ties to the land that were made through those treaties. In 1910, there was an Omnibus Act that further damaged any inherent self-governance, that did away with those traditional forms of government like tribal councils, recognized the head people and their communities and their families. So that 1910 Omnibus Act that where the United States would no longer recognize those forms of self-governance created the necessity a few years later of the Indian Reorganization Act. Because I don't know if many people actually think about why there was that need to create that Indian Reorganization Act.
Because you couldn't impose a constitution on them.
Right. And now the Indian Reorganization Act, and this is the thing that I want the young people to really think about and hopefully come up with a good understanding is it's federal legislation. With the creation of federal legislation, It created this Indian Reorganization Act. Recently, I had the opportunity to listen to Gary Frazier, the executive director of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribal Executive Committee, who was subpoenaed to the J. Saros trial in Itasca County. Mr. Gary Frazier got on the stand, and he told under oath, he told the judge in the court that the only powers the RBCs are exercising is the powers granted through the Indian Reorganization Act, Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Constitution. So coming from the executive director's own mouth, he's saying that the only powers the current RBCs and TECs are exercising is federally created legislative powers. Their claim of exercising inherent sovereign authority is false without that election by the Anishinaabe people in the secretarial or election with the clear and precise language saying we are giving this inherent powers, roles, and responsibilities to these entities. And so far it hasn't happened. There was earlier talk about the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe and their executive branch and legislative branch form of government. It's a myth. I've been in the Mille Lacs tribal government headquarters when that same executive director of the Tribal Executive Committee, Gary Frazier, sends out the election notices for the executive and legislative branch of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. It's for a chairman of the Reservation Business Committee. It's for the secretary-treasurer of the Reservation Business Committee. It's for those district reps whose positions are enumerated in the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Constitution. It's always been my belief that when I look at the Indian Reorganization Act's Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Constitution, I see a constitution that was created to evolve with the participation of its membership, or those that supposedly come under that governing document. Now, I personally can say I've never raised my hand to support, protect, and honor the MCT Constitution. At one time, long time ago, I did raise my hand to say I would support the United States Constitution when I enlisted, but that probably ended with my enlistment also. So I've often thought that the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Constitution really did not belong to me. Where it does involve me is that through the federal political process, some 50 years ago, my parents saw fit to submit my name to the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe for political enrollment into that federally legislated, created entity. I was already born Anishinaabe, but they went through that political process to have me enrolled in the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe. And somehow, following the matrial lineage instead of the cultural patrilineage, I ended up a liege slave. Makande Winini. Makande Winini was young man of the pillagers, for those who kind of take by force. But I want people to think about that, because there is a clear distinction of what's happening with this Constitution. When you look at this Constitution, the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Indian Reorganization Act Constitution, it's doing what it was intended to do. However, there's been some acts by the elected officials that look at the Constitution and don't see it as a legal document, but a document that hinders their efforts to do something that the Constitution doesn't allow. And if they wanted things that the Constitution doesn't allow, one of the things that they always could have done, and they've done it a couple of times, even if it's done erroneously and the outcome has been more harmful than beneficial, it's to go through that same amendment process that the elected officials swear to uphold and support. with White Earth and other things wanting to create new constitutions, you would think that they would first have to resign the positions they're elected to before they went about trying to create something different than what they've already solicited votes from people to put them into. If you go about and solicit a vote for a position enumerated in the IRA MCT Constitution, you're asking people to vote for you for that enumerated position, whether it's 4 or 5 TEC or RBC. That's the position they're asking people to vote for them in that position. Now, if the membership wants to create a new constitution, say, I think it has to be generated by the people, and I would take a hard, long look at, and even question the sense of people that would want to rewrite a new constitution under the Indian Reorganization Act, because it's already going to limit. You're just going to be exercising something that was created in 1934. That's a creation of federal powers. Planetary power of Congress or whatever. It says they have total control over Indians. So I would really question really think about creating a new constitution. I know I'm mugging, but
did that actually, to make your citizenship? You're going to be a citizen for them to legislate over you. Now it's proven fact that we're not a citizen of the United States, but yet they legislate over us. What I'm saying is, there's ways to become a citizen. An act of Congress is not one of them, and that's what they did. Jobs across the board. They said, well, now you're all enrolled. Citizens, and you can't do that. There's a process in their constitution that says how you become a citizen, right? And I don't read anything in there that says that a piece of legislation can do that. And then that's one of the things that we talked about before is how the hell are they legislating over us if you're not a citizen of the nation?
It kind of goes
It
back.
excludes you in their constitution.
Yes, but it goes back to what Dale said, and I agree with you. The plenary power of Congress has total control over the
That's another
said
issue. That's
Indians.
another
Yeah.
something that they
It's a legal fiction.
200 book, man. I think it's time for you to write that book.
What I mean is, how the hell are they legislating over people that are not members of their country? Is what I'm saying. Now it's clear by the treaty, our treaty, and also in their constitution that governs their whole system. It excludes us. Now they're still legislating over us. That's the freaking problem here. We're allowing a foreign government to legislate over us, and we're not a part of that. It says excluding Indians not taxed, just like you said.
Well, I think one of the things, and I mentioned it in that 1871 Indian Civilization Act, where many of us are products of the boarding school education, public education, and someone earlier was talking about, yes, this isn't taught. There's only a handful of people that understand this concept, that we were purposely destabilized. We were purposely dysfunctionalized. Our kids came home from boarding school, victims of sex abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and there wasn't the systems in place once they got home to help them to be reacculturated. But it happened because we're here yet today. No matter what the United States has thrown at us, we're still here. But for the good majority of our people, the final solution is working. It has caused us not to be able to come together as a people and find that common thing we all hold and retain, which is the things that for countless generations worked. If I were to be involved in creating a new constitution, and I would want it to look culturally or traditionally, I would want that family, community, representation style government that our people practiced for countless generations. And I don't see that in any of these IRA Constitution because that's a foreign concept to that. Exercising federal power as an Indian Reorganization Act entity, we hear the term quasi-sovereign, dependent domestic nation of the United States government. Now, for those that don't understand quasi, it means sort of, nearly, almost, wannabe. And
Not taken seriously.
not taken
The worst
seriously.
part though is it negatives your identity. See?
Exactly. And one way people should think about it is could a woman be quasi-pregnant? She could want to be. She could be trying to be. She could, in her heart, really, really want to be pregnant. But until that rabbit's dead, it's quasi. It's almost merely wanting to be and whatnot. So that's one way of trying to understand the quasi-sovereignty. No matter what happens, it's almost, nearly, but not really.
No, I really think that's important, and we're caught up in this thing without people fully realizing, what it has done to us and what it continues to do to us. It's like the Secretary of Interior and the BIA, they're supposed to play a significant role in our government, right? By reviewing what these guys pass and make sure it's in compliance with the Constitution. They have a legal duty. That's stated in the Constitution. But they have totally abandoned that. The TEC and RBCs are totally working underhandedly in allowing what they have been allowing here. Now at White Earth you have a police force, a court system, and here in June they're going to assume criminal jurisdiction with the ability to give you up to 3 years in prison. You also have the federal government now has concurrent jurisdiction where if you commit a crime that is concerned felonious or a felony, they can lock you up too. But they said there's no double jeopardy. I think this was mentioned before, but we have to look at that. That's very serious, and this has all been done underhandedly by modifying or impacting our Constitution without the people say so. We can't allow that, folks. If we don't do something and stand up as a people, we're going to have nothing.
In reality, we're still under the War Department, and
well, yeah.
Each res has a number. We're kind of like in a prisoner of war camp in a sense, and that's exactly what it is. You're under the War Department, the Bureau. Interior, man, that's too
well, right, and the Constitution has not been amended, repealing the Secretary's role or the BIA's role here. It has not. So they're still bound by that. It's a written Constitution that says that. We have a right to referendum, but the TEC chooses not to put those things like 180, that they have the right to interpret the Constitution. They didn't put that up for a referendum. A lot of people don't want to watch what they're doing, and they subtly or secretly pass these old things hoping nobody will grab onto them. I think a lot of us here have been holding about that for years. What are these interpretations all about? Are they in fact amendments? Well, that's what my view is. They amended our Constitution without our having a say in it. 20% of the people can petition the TEC.
Hold that thought.
Well, we're not under double jeopardy. We're under triple jeopardy here. When you got the tribal, state, and federal all breathing down, and our next year Holy ball,
yeah.
man, we're really
Yeah,
going
But
to
you created now, it takes 60%, if her new constitution goes through, it's gonna take 60, what is it, 63%?
2/3.
To remove someone. And
Or
we have a hell of a
amend
time
the
at 30%.
Constitution. You know, we have a hell of a time
But you
right
should
now
hold it
with
to that
30%.
standard to change it now then.
Yeah.
Okay.
From what I read, she's going to try to have the thing voted on, her new constitution in August.
Yeah.
Is that?
Right.
I went to a constitutional thing in Tucson, Arizona, and our representative from White Earth apparently was talking about their constitutional change, and I was the only member of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe there. The only member.
And the person making the presentation was a non-member by the name of Jill Dorfler, being the expert communicator of what we were going to do with our Constitution. No, they're totally wrong on this. The Constitution, the current Constitution, that is the Constitution that is in existence, doesn't provide for that. That's what people have to understand. And we got to stop this madness, lest we end up living in police state, because that's what's coming, folks.
Someone's there now.
Right. You know, there have been a lot of constitutional violations. I think we touched upon them. All the constitutional interpretations that have been handed down by the TEC are in fact unconstitutional, illegal, however you want to put it. There were some enforcement enforcement mechanisms that were initially enforced by the solicitor's office, in that they held for 14 years from 1980 to 1994 that the Constitution would have to be amended in order for them to set up courts, have police force, all these things that they're currently doing with no amendment. But in 1994, that was changed with a political interpretation or political opinion by a guy by the name of Michael J. Anderson. This was done under the watch of Ada Deer. But there has been no constitutional amendment saying they can do these things. I think it was mentioned earlier, we were talking about the self-governance compacts. I think that impacted our government, or sort of gave governing officials the impression that if they entered into these things, they could set up all these systems that the Constitution doesn't allow. And that was an action by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to allow these things to happen, as if it didn't really impact the Anishinaabe, who were purportedly represented by these actions. And that had a big impact, but since that time they've been acting as if, with all the adoptions of these compacts with the various reservation business committees to do the things that they always wanted to do, but the Constitution itself prevented. And those are serious issues. And I hope that the people get a grasp on this or understand what's going on. Certainly, have members who are, quote, educated, whatever that means, and should be able to comprehend what is really happening to us as a people. Like I said, they know how to amend the Constitution. 1987, they tried to amend it, giving themselves absolute power. Since that time, they've been acting as if they have this absolute power. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Congress, I think I was showing Kevin here, through an Appropriations Act in 1991, with the Department of Defense, Congress, in fact, talked about or changed what was considered powers of self-governance, kind of went hand in hand with the effort in compacts. We have to understand that, how that impacted our government. Now they're saying that these, I think it was mentioned before, that you now have a federal agency assuming to have inherent sovereign powers. That's wrong. That's wrong. The Department of Interior certainly changed their legal opinion, substituted, as I said before, a political decision to give deference to the tribe's interpretation. Well, that's certainly an attempted amendment through 180, what they term 180 tribal constitution interpretation, that says only the TEC has a right to interpret that document. The people never authorized that. People never given that authority. So there was no legal analysis to that, none whatsoever. Just a statement. We give deference to the tribe's interpretation of its own constitution. A lot of people say, well, that's wonderful. Now we have, no, it isn't wonderful. Because it does away with any protection we have, the people have. And I'm speaking for the people. I'm not talking about the TEC or the RBCs. Any protections we have against these bodies were associated with those opinions, and they were apt opinions, competent opinions, and then they substitute a political opinion to accommodate or get what they wanted through to say, well, these bodies now have this authority. No, they don't. Sorry.
Well, we've sent all that material to everybody. You remember? Everybody out there,
but they ignored those things, and that's why we're attempting to do what we're doing here, so the general public, and especially those Minnesota's Chippewa tribe members, in fact, understand what's going on. They want to keep this in the dark. I agree with what you're saying, but if we don't do something like we're doing right now to inform the communities, hey, it's all over. And this is why we don't have monies or the resources to combat this type of assault on us through our own governing document. And if the governing document is no good or not recognized by the federal government, saying, oh, well, that was just child's play or whatever, however you want to give a negative connotation to it, then why should we be bound by it? We shouldn't. And either we have a constitutional form of government or we don't. And obviously it would be better for us to not have this form of government where the people have no input into it whatsoever.
Well,
we don't even have a vote.
Most of this was set up for financial purposes anyhow. The current,
yeah, but it has went beyond that.
It's gone far beyond.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's originally set up just to funnel monies into programs and they've slowly, taken more and more. They like these election ordinances. Wow. I mean, if they can't get their way on one way, the next year there's a new line thing in the next election ordinance. They can opt in and opt out. I think that is so ridiculous. And they can opt in on, when they have the primary, like Irma's situation, I'll use that. She knew very well that she was they had it rigged so she was gonna make a landslide, right? So she does that. She gets a landslide, then there's no appeal in the primary. But they opted in on the election to have a primary. I mean, to have and I asked Fraser, I said, how is this happening? And Gary said, well, Ray said, they didn't decide not to opt out. He said, they just didn't opt in. I said, well, Gary, what the hell's the difference? There's two options. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out.
Read this.
And
there's honestly only one.
And he got all embarrassed, but what the hell? He was sitting there like an idiot, saying stuff like that.
Goes back to Article 13.
There's panel discussion on what we have to do as a sovereign people. We're not talking about the agents of the federal agencies that purport or pretend to represent us. They can't. You have an entity that belongs to the federal government, and to represent people who are not a part of that. I go along with Dale in his quote on the United States Constitution. It states very clearly that we are not part of the people of the United States. That term, excluding Indians not taxed, that's very important. The quasi-citizenship we were given by Congress in 1924, it's meaningless. It's like a third-class term to define our citizenship. We can't be. The Constitution of the United States would in fact have to be amended, striking that language, excluding Indians not taxed. That hasn't been done. So all of this is a fiction, and it's time that the world knows what they're doing to oppress us, to steal our land, to steal our resources. Now they even went as far as to steal our human right to self-determination. That's what we're losing here. And people, in fact, if we don't deal with this matter, they're going to do away with us. They're going to accomplish what they've always wanted to do, and that's to obliterate our humanity, our identity. And they've done very well and fooled, I'd say 99% of our people, because our people do not have access to what the real problems are and how they can be dealt with. I think we're a small group of people who do know what's going on, and we have to carry that message to the world, also this country. There's no other people like us here. They even say that. This is a country of immigrants. Well, we're not immigrants. We were here. We were the first people. And we cannot allow this, and it's up to the people to deal with this stuff. If everybody loves the IRA government so much, then so be it. Let them have that. But we have the human rights ourselves to determine our own form of government and how that government is going to watch out for us. Right now, nobody's watching out for us. The only ones that are watching out for us is us right here, We want justice. We don't want to be just termed, it's just us. It's not just us. It's all humanity. If they can do what they're doing to us, think what's coming.
My personal view is there is nothing wrong with the Constitution the way it is. It's just not being followed or amended or whatever. Enforced. My personal view is those that were elected to the IRA MCT constitutional positions should follow that constitution and allow for that transition of the rights or the funding for the resources, to pay our bills, to be the conduit of funding from the United States fiduciary responsibility to us. We didn't ask the United States government to create plenary power over us. We didn't ask them to assume that plenary power over us and say they're going to provide this fiduciary role to us for health, housing, and education. 1871, they picked up that themselves, and by the United States government saying they have that trust responsibility, that fiduciary responsibility to us, the IRA MCT Constitution was created to allow for that transition of funding to come to the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, the individual reservations, be dispersed, take care of our business aspects, and to pay our bills and manage our affairs on that type of level. Now, if they're asking me to give up my inherent rights, if they're having jurisdiction and dominion over myself, my children, and my grandchildren, I oppose that. I think that if the Anishinaabe Ojibwe people wanted to create an umbrella organization, government over the IRA entities, that's what people should be organizing for. Why would you not look at the re-exertion or re-emphasizing the thing that we already have, which is our clan system, our family system of representatives, and to reorganize that or re-exert that and allow the Indian Reorganization Act, Minnesota Chippewa Tribe, to remain that conduit, that tie to the United States government to fulfill that role to those people that rely upon and deserve those services. It should not be in the government business unless there's an amendment to that Constitution that where the people start the process of being involved in that amendment process. Otherwise, they just remain what they are, what they asked people to vote for them for those positions, and remain that tie, conduit for the funding, connection to the United States, and allow the people the resources and opportunities to come together across wherever. The policies of relocation, boarding school, it scattered our people to the wind. There's those terms called lost birds, and some of those lost birds, for whatever reason, may have been scattered to the winds. The Christian poem Footprints in the Sand, where Jesus carried many people for this period of persecution where it was really bad to be Indian, really bad to be practicing your spiritual and religious ways, and those were the kids that were targeted for boarding school if their parents did that. Of course, a lot of kids went to boarding schools out of economics and to be fed and whatever, but it created that lost bird people that may now be trying to find their way back, that may have lived in Chicago or Minneapolis or Los Angeles or Cleveland. Yes, they may come back as blonde, blue-eyed. Yes, they may come back as black. But through the Debwewin teachings, they may be coming back because it's a safer time to come back. It's only been since 1978 that we've had that American Indian Religious Freedom Act, another federally legislated creation, on the same peer with the IRA. So that's, that answers some of your question is, I look at the Constitution and I want it to remain exactly what it is. That's what the membership voted for, was those individuals to represent them on that RBC, TEC, and it should remain what it is. And if there's more authorities, more powers, more powers, then the right way to go about it is the amendment process. But here's the problem with the amendment process. The outcome is suspect. And they don't want to take a chance of saying, well, we want police and judicial systems, because the next thing you know, the police will be being called on them to be brought into their own judicial systems for violating their oath of office or the role they were elected into.
We're recording this to put it on the internet to in fact inform people what's going on here, because we don't have monstrous resources here. All of us are poverty stricken. We don't have the big bucks to print out, but we do have access to the information. Anything that we have stated here can be substantiated. I see very little people. What we're dealing here with is the truth.
Debwewin.
And that's what we got going for us.
The other problem we got is that they got all the lawyers, they got all the money.
Oh yeah.
And
now they got law enforcement, courts.
I think we should have access to federal prosecutors and stuff. We really should.
Well, we got Ed Peterson.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah. We got those, and we're calling upon those people who are aware of injustices being done to peoples around the world. Why not us? Why do we have to go all over the world to find injustice when in fact it's right in their backyard, so to speak? We have to do this. And we are going to do this. We might feel the repercussions of what we're doing, but at the same time, I don't think that the truth hurts us in any way, other than getting the appropriate information to the people that are affected by this. And a lot of things that are being done here, when they first set up their police force, maybe this was mentioned before, they didn't have criminal jurisdiction, so they enter into agreements with the state, compacts, law enforcement compacts. The people didn't extend to tribal officials the authority for criminal jurisdiction or jurisdiction to enforce civil regulatory laws. They had none. So they enter into a compact, and for the life of me, I don't understand how the state could extend to tribal government the authority for making arrests, writing tickets, and so forth. And they do it's like an extension of state power to tribal officials here. And the state of Minnesota itself, and I think a couple of cases that impacted us very negatively. The Davis case, which involved Mille Lacs government under their self-governance compact, and involved Leech Laker, who was speeding on Mille Lacs, and he was turned over to state jurisdiction because he was not a member of Mille Lacs, and so they made a determination that the state had the right to prosecute because he was not a Mille Lacs member. He was a Minnesota Chippewa tribe member, but that was meaningless. So they had started, the state started their effort in interpreting our document, what it meant. The tribal executive committee certainly should have intervened in that and said, hey, state, you have no business there, but they didn't. And now they're currently litigating another case, state of Minnesota versus Tom Searles, for not having proper registration or insurance. He's a Whiter member, married to Leech Laker, and because he's from White Earth, the state of Minnesota, following Davis, says they have jurisdiction. That's in the appellate court level right now, and there again, the state of Minnesota is interpreting that document. You know, I think the TEC gave some what would you call it, Dale? A half effort to say, well, you know, really, we're this and we're that, but not, you know, taking a strong position, say, hey, state, you have no business. This involves the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, and we have authority over these matters. And certainly there's some indicators that the, was that the solicitor's officer, Anderson, who in fact handed down that decision? There's some indicators of that. Anyway, but now he works for the tribe, and there hasn't been a real concerted effort as far as the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe's Tribal Executive Committee and taking a strong position against that. So we have those things to look at, you know. It's just amazing how this kind of has snowballed into almost an absolute power of tribal government, which is in fact erroneous, and we got to get a handle on this, folks. If we don't, it's the final solution.
You know, touching on that subject, you know, being a Pillinger, I should have every right to go to Leech Lake and drop a deer or throw a line in the water, but I'd be persecuted by the tribe over there. I remember years ago, Big Rice Lake, everybody is invited, all tribes are invited to go Rice Lake. Now we separate ourselves with one another.
For sure.
You can't come Rice here if you're not a member here. And I can't go drop a line in Leech Lake without being prosecuted.
Sure.
You know?
The old thing, just like I was talking about, the effort here is separation again. You know, they want to divide this up into 6 reservations, each one kind of an island, so to speak. But
Thank you.
no, that's not right. We're one tribe, and so all the territories should in fact cover all members of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. We're one. We're not 6 individual entities that have nothing to do with each other. That's insane. That wasn't the purpose, you know. And it's too bad that the government, federal government, changed its mind and say, oh, it'd be better to do it this way to accommodate, you know, our policies.
Well, at one time it was that way, wasn't it?
Well, yeah.
You can,
But they're doing all these actions to accommodate what they want, not what is best for us. And that has to be known. People are so unaware. You know, right now, I'd say here at White Earth, 98% of the people don't know what's coming down in June. They publish in their little paper, oh, well, the federal government's going to have concurrent jurisdiction. My understanding is they're going to build a jail here, you know, to hold our people. What was the initial thing? 2 years. Now they're trying to jack that up to 3 years. And like I said before, if in fact they get that authority, well, they got that authority because Congress acted. But people will be doing federal time too here. You know, that's insane. Why? Because there's lawlessness. Well, you know,
doesn't that make it even more important to challenge that right of Congress to legislate over a sovereign people? I mean, they might be legislating over the RBCs, but it's affecting the sovereign people, the Anishinaabe, and clearly they don't have that power to legislate over a sovereign people. Yet we're sitting here and we're taking it. I think we have to challenge that somewhere. They do not have the right to legislate over us, period. But they're doing it through these agencies of them, and it's like a facade. It makes it look, and everybody on the front, it looks like it's legal and real and all this and that. But when you dig into it, it's so clear that they don't have that power to legislate anything over us. But how the hell are we going to? That's the dilemma. How are we going to get there? Get to that place where we can challenge that?
Well, I think you're right. We have to go back to historical fact, and the historical fact is that they, in 1871, took the power from the executive branch and turned it over to the legislative branch without going through the process of amendment to the United States Constitution. They skirt the issue all the time.
It's been devastating.
That wasn't our fault. That was their doing. We had nothing to do with that. But the people of the United States certainly should take a look at that and understand what happened there and how that is, being perpetuated to, in fact, destroy us and destroy our sovereignty. That's so very important, and the people of the United States have to take a look at this in order to rectify it. A lot of the things they do with Indian people are in fact legal fictions, and we want to impress that upon everyone who is viewing this and who can assist us in rectifying this terrible situation that the Anishinaabe Ojibwe are caught up in right now.
I think
and what's happening to them.
That has to be challenged, because unless you got to take back who we are. If you say I'm sovereign, but I want to challenge this drunk driving law, I want to challenge this and that. Bullshit. You're sovereign. You challenge everything that they've done to you, and that's starting with the 1871 Act. Because everything from that point on,
all we'd be doing is taking back what rightfully belongs to us.
And that's your sovereign position. And like I said, if you're sovereign, you're sovereign. If you can't be a little bit pregnant, you can't be a little bit sovereign. You're either one or the other, And yeah, it's true. Yeah, and if we don't call a spade, it's going to be a heart. That's my opinion here, because we got to lay it on the line where it's at. And like as lawyers, every lawyer I talk to, oh man, they take 100 years, But who the hell is talking about a 100-year fight? We're talking about taking it. Might be a 100-year fight, but we're going to take it to where it started. And that's what that 1871 crap they pulled there. And I don't think any of that. Yeah, like Mara said, the white people should be up in arms over that. They've taken a power away from the president to a treaty power. That's from now on, we're not going to do any treaties, but it's funny to say. Any treaty from that before that time was law of the land, right?
Supreme law of the land.
Supreme law of the land. And we have to take that position, or we're going to, like I said, we'll be here 100 years from now doing this.
Mark, could you explain that again about people that are going to be going through this jail system, like doing time, tribal time, doing federal time, and how that will roll out for a person?
Well, the passage of the Tribal Law and Order Act of 2010 grants criminal jurisdiction to tribal governments, and Whiter's the first to take that effort on. They're going ahead and taking advantage of that law, and have set up a court system, a police force to deal with that. I think under the law they can give up to, for criminal offenses, they can give up to 2 years. I believe they're working on 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, well, 3 years they can put you in jail for these criminal acts or crimes that they consider felonious.
I have a question. When a federal act gets in place, it's in place, right? How is it in place?
Well, they got certain, if the federal government deems it's also a federal crime, and they will prosecute it.
No, I mean, if a federal act comes in with the law enforcement, that Law and Order Act, that's a federal act, correct?
Right.
How does it come to place to an individual reservation? Wouldn't the act come to, since we're still consolidated as a collective as the tribe? How does an individual reservation able to accept? Try to follow me, because I might be completely wet right here. How does an individual reservation able to accept that act when we are still consolidated as a Minnesota Chippewa tribe? Why wouldn't that act come directly to the tribe? Then the tribe must, from that point, set up its doctrine to. Am I wrong, or?
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
Governing compacts. That's how they're
Yeah, those compacts.
Yeah,
Those self-governance compacts.
True, but then within the Law and Order Act itself, it must be discussed exclusively in an act that is geared towards that. Because if it don't, then I'm going to use a simple principle that we have, Article 13. Article 13.
Explain that.
It's all our rights. That's designed in Article 13 of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe Constitution. So it's kind of like, go back a little bit here. Tribal Interpretation 280, we'll just use Tribal Amendment 280, because that's what you believe it is. Okay, so do I. Okay, gives the reservations or the tribe to have tribal courts, correct? Okay, now, if I have in a tribal court, if an individual was driving down a BIA road, I'm using the BIA road right now, I'm not getting into public road right now, a BIA road on Fond du Lac, and a person is from Mille Lacs, then why, in fact, can't that be handled at that reservation level? Since Article 13 still exists with the structure of the tribe, then why are we going in a different direction instead of using what we have in front of us?
Well, I think that would be the proper way to.
I don't think they've actually looked at it from that standpoint.
They haven't given up too much of their power.
Yeah.
Right.
No, we.
No, they are. I'm saying, but they're see, by doing what. Letting us do what you're saying is the right way, in fact, but that would be, the United States would be giving up an authority over you.
True. Well, here's the question that's at hand then, and we'll just break it down simply in my mind, and I don't know if I'm right, wrong, or indifferent here, is that if it's a federal act, then somebody has to show me on paper within that federal act that it goes to the individual band. Whether it's a compact agreement or not, it must exclusively state in that, or that federal act goes to the tribe as a whole, correct? Right?
Sure.
Then that point from there, it would have to be done for what do you call delegation of authority. That's the wrong word to use, but it's that kind of principle.
Yeah, it is. And do these acts, in fact, amend our Constitution specifically?
That's another issue that's at hand.
Yeah, and so I think it was a blanket all coverage in response to the lawlessness on the other reservations where they were talking about some people raping Indian women, and the federal authorities said they didn't have the means or the abilities to prosecute those individuals. At least that's what they stated. This was in response to those issues that they would extend to tribal courts authority to now prosecute non-members or non-Indians in the tribal court systems. And I think the citizens of the United States better take a look at that and say, well, wow, how can another entity prosecute me for crimes that they don't have authority to do. You know, will that be challenged? I'm sure it will. But now people can start recognizing or realizing how what's the term I'm looking for? How it feels to be prosecuted by a system that you're not a part of. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but the effort was to legislate inherent sovereign power into tribes now, and there have been several cases, Lara, Duro, where they kind of piggybacked everything to grant inherent sovereign powers. You know, I used to ask attorneys here, how can an agency, federally created tribe like the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, White Earth, have inherent sovereign powers over the individual? Be like Fond du Lac in your 1854 treaty, you know? That's what established Fond du Lac, right? Here at White Earth, it's the 1867 treaty. They create this federally created tribe called the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, White Earth Band, and suddenly now they have inherent sovereign authority. Where'd they get that? They turn around and talk about, oh, well, we're the successor government. Well, you know, a question I have here at White Earth is, when did the Chippewa of the Mississippi turn over that authority to the federally created monster they call the White Earth Band? You know, and that is now the one exercising these so-called inherent sovereign powers. Make sense? Or confusing?
No, I understand it. I'm just, I know, just something in the back of my head tells me that the simple document that we have, that we govern ourselves by, is the answer to something that's sitting in front of us.
Yes, I agree. Because
and that's the challenge.
Enforceable.
And that's the challenge point of it.
Yes.
You know, Article 13 is a very, very important article.
Yes.
It
That's
gives
like
it.
rights without remedies.
That's true, but this really bothers me. The Law and Order Act. It really bothers me in a bad way. The federal act applied, in your term, to tribes, not to individual bands, to tribes. The MCT is a consolidation of several bands as one tribe. The Law and Order Act then should have had to come down into that implementation to the Minnesota Chippewa tribe. Then the Minnesota Chippewa tribe at that point would have to do what they have to do on this principle, not an individual band. An individual band does not have that authority to have